So, what would it take for us to start thinking about all of this differently? I feel like we are overwhelmed right now, rightfully so, but we're overwhelmed to the point of being crippled. Social media is keeping us both overwhelmed but also pacified. And I'm nervous because it's one thing to be overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. This is overwhelming. I'm overwhelmed to the point where I put myself on camera, you know? But it's almost as if we're practicing overwhelm as a culture because it's the only identity that's being fed to us right now. And to me, while there's so many things to say about what's going on in the climate, it's also an interesting diagnosis for ourselves because we're so used to our identities coming from outside of ourselves. And I think we're in a moment where things are uncertain, but we haven't really named and started practicing the fact that like the whole entire ball game is uncertainty. And really it's more so a matter of whether or not the goal as we've stated it so far is about navigating that uncertainty based on who we understand ourselves to be, and then being able to shape our immediate lives and communities in the world based on who those people are. There's a difference between being overwhelmed, which is the state, and practicing overwhelm, which is a habit or a decision. We're practicing, on the other hand, it's kind of like we're like so overwhelmed that we're crippled, or on the other hand, we're so overwhelmed that we are practicing almost like this level of escapism and denialism. And is that the plan? Like, is that the plan that we think that we are going to escape all of this through escapism? Because that's a setup. And while this is hard stuff, no question, we can't build a world that's worthy of us if we're still hiding from our own reflections and our own power. And so, if you're somebody who's thinking like money and means will insulate you from, what is going on here in America, I don't know what to tell you. Because the reality is, we are talking about a global shift that is going to require us to become the people who survive this as opposed to just figuring out what to do. And that's where this comes in. I think we're in a moment where it's kind of like we feel like our activism has to be so visible when actually it just needs to be embodied. Um, because, even if we did every single thing that anybody has ever put out there as a call to action, and we all did that same thing together, though there are so many opportunities that have passed where if we had just kind of all hung tough and banded together, we could have made more change. And so that's definitely an important practice. But at this point, I'm not convinced that if we were to all just do said thing, that we would end up creating a world that's any different than the world that we're experiencing right now, because we haven't talked about how we've changed and how the world hasn't kept pace with us. We haven't really bought into this idea that we are actually able to do anything. And I think maybe it's because there's such a difference, there's such a gap between who we feel like we are in our lives and our worlds, and then how it is that we show up, in the actual world. This assault on our creative capacity started long ago with our cultural obsession with certainty. And these are uncertain times, and we need to figure out the muscle that we need to use to move beyond it. There's no question that these are a lot of hard realities and hard choices and hard decisions. But there's a part of me that's wondering if hard needs to also feel so heavy all the time. Is there a way to make this feel like a more natural practice of us trying to figure out how we decrease the space between who we know ourselves to be on the inside and how people experience us on the outside, and then what the world reflects back to us because of that? It's almost like we've decided that changing ourselves feels implausible because we feel like other people aren't going to change. And If that's working for you, then go on, keep believing that. But I think that there is a path. We have disconnected from ourselves so wholesale and resolved to perform identities that are being fed to us. And it's almost like we kind of want to be the same but get different results, and it's just not possible. The reality is we are constantly changing, and us not being able to face that, and narrate that change because we feel some type of way, around like what that might look like, or, we're nervous about our becoming, like, look, you know what I mean? Like in real time, in person, and the mess of that. Um, you know, those fears keep us from being able to have a collective conversation around what it means to apply who we know ourselves to be in this moment, and what it means to look at ourselves in motion. And I think that's what's keeping us in this loop. I mean, I say all this to say, like, here I am, somebody who typically does not really like, I love people, but I don't really love visibility. And I think what you're seeing is me using my overwhelm. This is a version of my art. This is my creation, because business as usual is what got us here. And we are going to need to tap into the creative power of our perspectives in order to build new solutions to our problems. Um, my life has been about navigating uncertainty, and I'm here to tell you that there is a path even when you can't see it. And so, what comes next is less about exactly what to do and more about who we become, because those people are going to have better solutions, right? We are being called in a lot of ways to feel our way through the dark. And the problem is, we don't really have a lot of guidance on how to transmute our feelings into actionable data. We need more avenues to discover who we are so that we can apply our unique and shared capacities to this situation. Um, I think we really have to sober up from this addiction to money and stats and views and content consumption, because we have so much content in the world and we still feel so malnourished spiritually. And we have to start asking ourselves those questions. And so this is less about money and views and more about message and our vocations, and how it is that we stay in conversation with ourselves to be able to show up as the many different needs to heal the world. I think we've forgotten that activism should emanate from the core of who we are. It's not something that should always just be kind of told to us in terms of what we need to do. Like, as much as you can say that personal is political, I absolutely believe that. But politics even feels so small. It's more so about, we have been defeated by our deference to other people in terms of how big we think our world should be, and how responsive those worlds can actually be to the moment, but it requires us to be responsive to the moment in our own ways. So as we think about how to navigate this overwhelming moment, and being able to honor the fact that we are sincerely overwhelmed, but also not wanting to just blindly practice that overwhelm because we don't have any other ideas of what to do, let's think about how we could apply this. So, say you're in the U bucket this week and you're like, I really want to focus, I'm just focusing on getting my mental, emotional shit together, right? I want you to take a second to think about the following. In this world of overwhelm, where we're feeling unable to respond, do you feel like within your life you've lost the ability to think and act creatively about what's possible for you and for your life? Can you identify areas of your life that actually reflect your unique creativity and agency? Or have you just been checking boxes? Can you remember examples from your life where you handled uncertainty well and pull from that place? If you're more so focused on your relationships and your relationship to your life and what it looks like, maybe connect with some friends. Is there one way that you guys have actually been practicing overwhelm and you instead want to try practicing possibility? What would that look like? On the other hand, maybe there's an opportunity for you to cancel or postpone some type of commitment that you know you just be performing through. And it doesn't really align with who you are, where you are, and you're just doing it to check a box. If you're thinking about this broader situation, maybe there's one space that overwhelms you that you can take a step back from. Is there a platform that is unnecessarily shaping the way that you view your role in society? Maybe mute it, limit it for a week, and notice if you are able to shift your perspective because you're not as overwhelmed or you're not drowning in the noise of their cynicism. Or if you're thinking about the hours bucket and you don't know what to do right now in this broader society, why don't we start by looking at communities that we actually do love? Why don't we start with what is it about the communities that I'm either involved in or that I admire that they do practice well that I would like to start applying on my own time? Try it out.